the Parks Township building, the Parks and Rec meeting for May 9th, 2024. Welcome. Pledge of Allegiance. Approval of the minutes from last month?
Motion to approve.
I'll
Second.
It's been motioned and seconded.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Tammy, you want to do the reports? For
Sure, Ian, if you could bring the screen up. April has been a really busy month. Arguably, it's our busiest month of the year and has evolved into that over the last decade. There's been a lot of events and a lot of things that are happening, so my report might be a little longer this month, but I do want to step through some of the great things that have happened. So first of all, I wanted to highlight a few weeks ago, members of the Township team attended the Radnor High School Civil Services Fair to engage students in what careers look like in civil service. So members of our police department, public works department, and of course the Parks and Rec department were in attendance. It was a really successful event. We had a chance to promote some of our summer job opportunities, some of our summer internship opportunities, as well as just professions and career that come natural within our government setting. So that was very successful. This Saturday, we hosted our first pet first aid training programs here in this office, in the Radnor Shire room. So we were really excited about that. It was a small group, but we had a sellout, so it's a very intimate group with a lot of different topics that are covered that you see here. So we're excited about and excited to continue offering them in the future. I know we're looking at doing CPR training and things like that for pets in the future coming soon. So really excited, and we were excited to host Perfect Pooch, obviously, who ran the program for us. We had an orienteering event on April 20th, which was really successful. I think we had almost 250 people in attendance at both the beginner level and an advanced level. I want to send a thank you to Tim Walsh with the Delaware Valley Orienteering Association for running the program for us. He's done a great job, and it's been a great partnership. Want to also highlight upcoming on May 18th, there's going to be, for baseball fans, Roberto Clemente this is a documentary that chronicles his life. It's going to take place actually in media, but this is being led by the Sports Legends of Delaware County, so I wanted to point that out, and if anybody's interested in attending, if you want to reach out, you can contact Jim Van Koski. He's the museum curator. You could let me know. I know we have a lot of space, so if anyone's interested, it should be pretty amazing. And then actually the next day we're going to be hosting on behalf of Steve Berman here in the office, in the Township building offices. He's going to showcase some of the memorabilia that he has from Roberto Clemente as part of his collection. Some of the images are here, like the 1960 Pittsburgh Pirates World Series ring, one of his jerseys from 1972, amongst a lot of other items. So we're excited about that, and that'll be on the Sunday following the documentary's premiere. All right, some other things that have happened in April. We had our 27th annual Youth Trout Derby. I want to give a firm thank you to the Chester Valley Sportsmen's Association for leading this. They prepare a lot of this for us. You could see there were some amazing fish that were caught down at Sawmill Park. This is an annual event. Obviously, we've been running for a long time. It's super popular, sells out. It's free, but it sells out in terms of registration in about 15 minutes. So we do priority where we try to ensure that residents that didn't have a chance to participate in previous years get a chance to participate, and we kind of work through that process. But this remains a popular one year after year, and gives folks a chance to experience a wonderful stream of Sawmill. It's really a nice little park. A lot of folks think it's actually outside the township since it's near the border, so we're excited about the partnership and the ability to be able to bring this event to young, budding anglers. Sorry, I keep
There's
showing
some
them.
massive fish.
That was huge.
That's like
Obviously a winner.
radioactive there.
We also held Friday, April 12th, just backing up to April. I know this was the day after our last meeting. We talked about it upcoming, but we had the Emlyn Tennell Centennial Birthday Celebration with a park rededication and a plaque unveiling. So I just wanted to scan through some of the pictures from the event, give a thank you to some of the Parks Board members that, of course, attended. It was so rainy. It was so miserable. I think it was one of the worst days, in the last couple months, but amazingly, though, towards the end of the event, the sun came out as soon as we unveiled the plaque, and everyone had a chance to interact with one another. Here you can see Valley Forge Military Academy joined us for presentation of the colors. And we also had Reverend Dr. Manuel Howard, who's a Garrett Hill native. He spoke at the event. Representative Lisa Borowski, of course, President Commissioner Maggie Myers was there. We also had John Mara there, who's the owner of the New York Giants. So really exciting day. A lot of folks joined us. We had 2 proclamations that were bestowed to the family. And then, of course, we had the dedication of the plaque and the unveiling where members of the family were in attendance to help us unveil it. And you can see how we went from rainy skies and we had, pictures with water dripping all over them to now beautiful sunny skies. And this was taken the day of the event. It almost looks like it wasn't. So if you get a chance, go down to the park and take a look at the plaque. It's really beautiful. And the Public Works guys did a really fantastic job of organizing the bed there in which it sits in. This is actually a new boulder that we installed and replaced the old one that had previously been at the park. As you can see here, the previous one. And then this is just some highlights from the statue dedication and the plaque that's here at the Township building, street renaming. A lot of this is all up on the website for folks to go through. Obviously, the cutter that was named in honor of Emlyn Tennell back in 2021 from the United States Coast Guard. And then we had a poster dedication that's also at Emlyn Tennell Park, and then just a collection of some of his great photos. All right, we'll jump to Arbor Day. So Arbor Day, we changed Arbor Day to Arbor Month this year because there's just so many arbor-related activities that have been going on. So we use it as a way to celebrate a lot of different activities. The Shade Tree Commission has been doing so many different plantings. They had their spring street tree planting that happened on April 17th and the 27th. They had restoration of tree plantings along Abrams Run, where they had previously done an invasives removal. So if you ever get a chance, you're on the exit drive leaving the Willows Park, you can see the wonderful work that they and many volunteers in the community had done. We had a variety of cleanups, and of course, we ended the month with our Arbor Day. So I was just going to scan through some of these. I know we talked about them last month. I didn't want to tie up too much time going back through all the wonderful activities. I did want to highlight, though, that the Shade Tree Commission did receive a Governor's Award for all of the plantings that they have done and all the strides that they have made with regards to tree care and maintenance here in Radnor Township. So I know that's something that we were highlighting as part of their efforts. So there's a little bit here on it. We have this posted on the website. If you want to read a little bit more, you can feel free to do that. We obviously had cleanups at Skunk Hollow and Brook Farm, a lot of activities highlighting, of course, the West Wayne Preserve Project, and then, of course, Arbor Day, which for us is always sort of a new and different celebration every year. We try to move around to different park locations, involve different groups. We've had a variety of different partners throughout the years. This year we had Wayne Elementary School actually walk over on a beautiful Friday for Arbor Day. They got to take a break. The Wayne Elementary students got to take a break from doing their, I think it's their PSSA tests. So they came over in the afternoon and they celebrated Arbor Day with us, and they actually engaged in a lot of tree plantings as well with our Public Works Department. We had members of the Radnor Conservancy team that was there, members of the Shade Tree Commission. Of course, our commissioners as well had attended. So here are just some photos. We planted several trees in the park, and they were really excited to continue to see those trees on a daily basis, and they'll be watching them thrive, of course, over their years here in Radnor. Lastly, last but certainly not least, of course, I want to highlight Wheels of Wayne. Again, I want to thank you to the members of the Parks Board that joined us for the event. It was another successful event, 10 years. We had a lot of really exciting things happening as part of this year's event. For one, we sold out very early in terms of car registration. So while the show had been really popular years ago, we hit a little bit of a down spiral coming 2020, 2021, 2022. Things rebounded, of course, in the last couple years, and this year it was really off the charts. So we had a very successful day. There's some great pictures that I wanted to share. We had a variety of cars from all ages. We had a 1904 all the way to 2024. Here's a beautiful picture just of an overview. You could see there was a lot of people. We figured there was in excess of 5,000 people at least that had attended. So this 1904 Cadillac up here at the top, that car actually won Best in Show. Again, this is another visual that we have up on the website if you want to take a look at it and read a little bit more. Here's all of our awards that were given. I know our Parks Board member, Sharifa, you were there with us to test pulled pork and pizza, I believe, so judging those contests was a huge help. We've got some pictures from that going on, a lot of volunteers that judge not only the vehicles, but judge the pulled pork and pizza contests, of course, that are an annual tradition. And of course, here are our winners with Christopher's, and Christopher's winning Best Pulled Pork, as well as Paula's winning the first place for pizza. I want to thank our sponsor, David Otto. They've been amazing. David Kelleher, who's the owner, lives here in town, and he's been a great sponsor over the years of this event, among many others. He was there with his team. Well, he wasn't there, but his team was there. He's been at other events, but he wasn't there this year. But his team came with a fleet of their vehicles to show off, of course, and they really made a great presence. I also want to thank some of our other sponsors like Rimal Motor Cars from right here in Radnor, and then, of course, locally, Sela Heating and Air Conditioning. So these are just some other photos, lots of participation, lots of vendors. Want to thank, of course, our police, public works, and even members of our IT team that help us out, and obviously the staff members of the Parks and Rec Department. It's really an amazing day. It's a lot of interconnected teamwork. Of course, with shutting the roads down, we expanded the footprint slightly a little bit this year. So in doing that, we want to thank the neighbors too for working with us and understanding those road closures. So with that, that concludes my reports for April. If anyone has any questions, I can certainly try to answer those.
I think it was the best one. It was really crowded. I congratulate you. It was a really good event.
Thank you. We too believe it was probably one of the most heavily attended. It was exciting. It goes by in a blink. So it's, with everything going on and a lot of running around and trying to keep, everything moving. It's a long event, but it's really the fastest event, and I feel like we run. It just goes by so fast.
There were even cars down under the bridge, which I thought was something.
Yep.
Like the motorcycles were this year.
Thank you for attending.
Any comments or anything, or?
I just figured I'd stay up here.
Okay.
I had one new business item. I know that's next, but we have the reports, I guess, first. So I figured I would stay up here, though, for new business and, of course, the start of old business with Fenimore Woods.
Commissioner Riley, do you have anything from the Board of Commissioners?
No, but thank you for asking.
Okay. Shade Tree?
So for Shade Tree, like I had noted about the governor's award that they had received, I know the commissioners had recognized them, of course, for their efforts, and also just the receipt of the Tree City USA, which is the backbone of the celebration of Arbor Day. I also wanted to note that on Monday night's Board of Commissioners agenda, there is a tree risk and hazard assessment that's going to be reviewed. And then it's going to go back to the Shade Tree Commission. So they're aware of it. They know what was conducted in terms of the review. It is relative to parks, so if you want to tune in and watch that on Monday night, I would definitely encourage it. And that was led by our township arborist in conjunction with our Public Works Director, Rick Foster, who's the liaison to the Shade Tree Commission and oversees a lot of the shade tree and tree-based activity in the township.
Okay. Any other reports?
I don't have any other reports.
Nothing. New business?
Under new business, I just wanted to highlight one item. We had graffiti that had occurred over at Beau Connor Park on the basketball court. It was about a year and a half ago. We're having the court repainted. We finally have been able to line up a contractor. Believe it or not, it's been a little bit of an exhausting process through it being an insurance claim, as well as just a lot of the contractors being backed up on work the last few years. So I just wanted to highlight it because I just got the date this week. Tomorrow they're going to start to pressure wash the surface, and then next week they're going to start the painting. So right now there's a large area that our Public Works Department painted over with just a darker green that doesn't match the green that's there. So we're finally, as a result of that insurance claim, we're going to have the court completely resurfaced. Some of the repairs where there might be some cracks and things like that will be taken care of, and then it'll be repainted. But it's all on an insurance claim based on the damages that we had sustained. So that, I don't have the exact date next week. It's kind of weather dependent. I'm not sure exactly when they're going to start. They're going to let me know. And then what's going to happen is it'll be closed for 2 to 3 days for the painting, and then there'll be a 48-hour cure time. So unfortunately, the court is going to be out of commission for maybe about 5 days, as long as it doesn't fall over the weekend. So we have Public Works ready to put a perimeter and a boundary around it with some signs as the contractor's working through the process of their work.
Do you get a lot of that in this township as far as graffiti writing and all that?
A little bit. It's here and there. I know we just had a graffiti incident down along the Cornerstone homes on the guardrail, where you come off of the tap trail and follow it down behind the Cornerstone homes. I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit later under the trails, but I know we had it there, and it's just sort of sporadic. It happens.
I hate that. That's just me personally.
I wouldn't consider it a chronic problem. Maybe once every, now that I say that, of course, it'll happen more often, but once or twice a year, then we'll go a year without it happening. So it just sort of depends.
I get upset with that one. Old business?
Under old business, and part of the reason why I was just staying up here is I wanted to talk about Odorriceo, I'm sorry, I don't know where my head is tonight. I wanted to talk about Fenimore Woods first on the agenda. I think Odorriceo's next. I wanted to just take a minute and just sort of kind of bring everybody up to speed a little bit on where we've kind of traveled, the road we've traveled on this in the last month. I know last month I had given an update. I had talked about the work of Seiler Jury on the stable, continuing to review that space for all the detail in which they can to rehab it in the most cost-efficient way. I know we talked about, really at the end of the day, what we found is that the cost to rehab the building isn't much different from what we saw 2 years ago from Gannett Fleming when we first embarked on that process. So we are seeing consistency there in terms of what it's going to take to rehab the stable, to make it a usable space, make it a public space, make it safe. I think I had noted it's a pretty sizable building compared to some of our other comfort stations and things like that we have here in Radnor Township. And there's a lot to do within the building. There's a lot of demo. There's a lot of environmental-based mitigation that has to occur. So it's definitely a sizable project. And we had we had planned to go to the Board of Commissioners in June with an update so that they could basically understand a little bit more what that scope of work entails, as well as the estimation of what the probable costs will be to rehabilitate it, which I think I had mentioned includes things like contingency, some escalation. We're going to break that all down for the commissioners, as well as the plan for what that would look like and what that would cost. So on Monday, June 17th, that's the meeting right now that we're eyeing, that we're trying to get to. But as part of that, we tried to take a look in-house to see, what is a way that we can reduce some of the magnitude of the other work. And when I say that, I'm referencing some of the work we talked about that Gilmore and Associates had been doing in terms of rehabilitation of the rest of the park. Kind of dissect what can we do in-house. What can our in-house engineering do? What can Parks and Rec oversee? What can Public Works oversee? And so we had that meeting and we worked through it a little bit more closely. And what we determined is, we would keep Seiler Jury engaged, obviously, on the final design and the overall oversight of the rehabilitation of the project for the stable, provided that is still appealing to the community and to the commissioners. Because I think that's where we are, is going back to the commissioners. Is there still an appetite to rehab this building? And that's something that we're going to need to determine. And with that, have Seiler Jury oversee not only the stable rehab, as they would typical in this type of a contract, but also the accessibility that's part and parcel with the building, as well as all of the adjacent site work with regards to the parking lot. We know there's some configuration changes that need to happen within the parking lot to make it more organized, not expanding the parking lot in any way, but reorganizing it, establish the accessible pathway to get to the comfort station, which would now be, of course, within the stable. One of the recommendations that I have is to remove the driveway back to it and make that just a pathway, because it is an attractive nuisance for people to drive back there. I stop there a lot in the mornings, and there's people there, parked there. I'm not sure what they're doing, just hanging out, but it's not uncommon for us in Public Works, of course, to see a vehicle parked back there. So it seems like the prudent thing to do is to remove that portion, and then, of course, establish the accessible parking spaces that are needed for the park within the configuration. I highlighted that area just to note that would be the portion that would be obviously contracted to Seiler Jury. And then really the remaining areas at this point we believe we can do in-house. The pavilion is, not only is it an item that Public Works can demo, they can rip it down, they can take out the pad, the concrete pad and the structure around it, but it's also more advantageous to us if we buy it off CoStars, which is a cooperative bidding and purchasing ability that we have as the township to purchase it on state contract. So we're going to save some money there. And then it's likely that we'll be able to purchase the installation too from a certified installer. So we would be able to do that. So even though we wouldn't be able to do the installation in-house, we think there's some cost savings rather than engaging a sub firm to do it and manage it for us. So we took a closer look at that. Our engineering department, as I had noted in the last meeting, is working on the replacement of the sanitary storm sewer line, and then some bridge rehabilitation down in this area that would be coming from the stormwater fund. So that wouldn't be impacted by the bond money that's been dedicated for the Fenimore Woods rehab project. So that would come out of a separate fund, and that's something we need to work on regardless. We looked at some of the other areas, like having our in-house engineer who works with Steve Norsini to design the accessible pathway, because we want to make sure that, not only do we have an accessible pathway that can get to the playground, but one that can also get to the pavilion, the new pavilion, obviously, and then, of course, all the way up to the parking lot and ultimately to the stable, because that's a requirement that we're going to have to be able to make in order to make the space accessible to those who would need it. So we believe that can be done in-house. We'll look at things like adding an accessible parking space, which, again, another item we can do in-house down in the lower parking lot, re-rolling the lower parking lot, reorganizing some of the bumpers or adding new bumpers that are there that are kind of split and cracked and sprucing it up, adding things like the Vera blocks that we have for the mulch over at Warren Philippone Park, and adding those into the park to keep the mulch more organized. So there's a list of things like that we feel like we can do in-house, and therefore kind of cut out anyone else, or any other firms that would be managing the project at that point, and instead we would just work directly with Seiler Jury. So part of the goal for the June 16th meeting is not only to have them there to present their pieces on the rehab, the scope of work, the anticipated rehabilitation, and what that's going to cost and what the details of that are, also looking at the conceptual plans, but also the updated costs that there might be for the parking lot, which is something that Seiler Jury would work through with their cost estimator, but then the list of the township items, we would also itemize with a ballpark cost on what those are going to look like. So that's kind of the direction that we're going in. And then at that meeting, I just want to jump to this slide real quick and kind of highlight down in this area. If we come to that meeting, so it would essentially be a review and a presentation of the second opinion that Seiler Jury did. And then if there's continued support, in that meeting, we would be requesting authorization from the Board of Commissioners by a resolution, of course, to engage Seiler Jury to do the final design. And then also the final design, which would entail the upper parking lot, the accessibility in the adjacent area. So if there's an appetite in that meeting and they support the rehabilitation as we present it to them, we'll take the next steps to basically having the proposals there and ready to be authorized in the same meeting. That way we don't have to come back to a subsequent meeting later on, because we do move to monthly meetings come summertime with the Board of Commissioners. And then in addition to that, we will discuss the work the township's going to be doing and what we understand that to be in terms of order of magnitude, at least a ballpark, so we know where we are within the remaining budget that we have for the bond. And then also, we would be looking to the board for authorization to bid the project. So we had authorization from the board to bid the project years ago when it was a different project. So I think it's prudent at this point we get that authorization. And we're required to do that. I mean, that is a natural step that we need to go through that's dictated by our charter. So that would also be legislated. And then start to work through that process. And then as that develops, continue to give updates, come back to the Parks Board. Perhaps there would be even a final presentation here. But that would be all steps we need to determine during that June 17th Board of Commissioners meeting in terms of how it does return back to the Parks Board and what your role will be moving forward in terms of those checks and balances. Obviously, I'm trying to give you updates every month on where we are, but that's kind of the state of where things are with that. Now, making purchases on like the co-stars of the pavilion and stuff like that, the board still has to authorize those. So those may have to go into July or future meetings. And then ultimately, once the project is bid, they have to basically authorize the award. So that's just, again, I'm just trying to put some stuff on paper so I could give an idea of like what might lie ahead, but all of it, as we know, is predicated on how we're going to move forward on the stable.
May I ask a question, Mr. Chairman? Yeah. Just a couple of questions. Not new, but just see.
No?
In terms of funding and the money, I assume if this goes forward at the next BOC meeting, funding for the design would come out of the bond. And then I guess at some point in time after there would be a price associated with whatever work is authorized.
Yes.
And in theory, that would also come out of the bond.
Yes. As would all of the expenses that we would be making internally as well.
Okay.
So when we make those purchases of furnishings, like site furnishings and things like that, those are all great things we can buy on the co-stars contract. So that would all come out of that as well.
Given the now more limited funding, is there a need to sort of have the whole menu priced before we start having the appetizers? I don't know.
Well, that's our plan at the June 17th
Okay.
meeting,
I
is
wasn't
to
clear for me
present
how-
that.
If we were
Yep.
doing this piecemeal number, come back.
No, we want to, on the June 17th meeting, and we've met internally, so Public Works understands that their task is to understand, like, for instance, perimeter fencing. The perimeter steel fencing is going to come down. I'd like to do post and rail. What's that going to cost? I'm assuming it could be, an item that would require board authorization regardless. So we would have to come back later on and have it approved by the board, but we at least want them to see a breakdown of what we anticipate what that's going to cost, as well as any in-house fees. So like, for instance, if the engineering department is putting their time towards the design of pathways in the park, or they're designing and speccing out for the bid the accessible, parking area, like, those costs would be assigned. Like, my time wouldn't go into that, most likely, for what I'm doing and working through, but when we're actually engaging the engineer on a project per se, in theory, we would allocate those towards this particular project, because we do, on many levels with Public Works and engineering, we do project accounting.
Thanks for that. Another follow-up, I guess. So the plan currently is to have the ADA aspects internally designed and constructed, or is that something we'd have to farm out as well in terms of the actual construction of actually laying a path somewhere?
So those are some of the pieces we're working through. So when we talked with Public Works, we believe things like, if we're looking at this, we're looking at the pathway, that kind of would come through this area, and then it would meet up with the parking lot, which Seiler Jury would be taking care of. We can do things like the grading, we can set the stone base, there's some other prep work that we can manage. We believe we can install that as well. I know we're discussing a porous pave, because our Public Works Department has done walkways and pathways before in some of our parks. So the intent is that they would do that work. And then where it stops, Seiler Jury's work will basically meet up with that. And so even though we're at this point, we're kind of looking at using porous pavement, we've seen it be very successful at Clemacrone. We don't see a lot of the water pocketing and things like that as much in using it. I know there's some maintenance that does go along with it, but then once we get to the parking lot, where the parking lot would be reconfigured, we can consider a crushed stone, or we can put it back to pavement, but that would be a specification development that would come from Seiler Jury, and most likely not be porous pave, because it is a lot more money. And again, we are trying to be cost savvy within, I think I'd showed the slide there a minute ago, on what we had left over before we even spent some funds towards the Seiler Jury planning that has taken place, which really hasn't been that much, but it's still chiseling away at that number.
Thanks again. Last question, I think. In terms of playground, I guess too early to be able to figure out, A, what the funding availability might be, and then B, what that might lead us to.
Yeah, so the playground, I pulled it off of here, but I had playground and I had the word conundrum after it, because and I was like, well, that's probably not good for my presentation. Let me take my personal thoughts off of there. The playground is a catch-22 for me, because it's so heavily utilized. But the issue right now is it does sit on a varying slope that's not ADA. If we were to touch it today, we would have to cut and fill that area, which isn't unlikely to be able to happen when we restore the sanitary sewer pipe that comes across there. So it is something we're going to look at. The only thing is that the playground as part of this is a big cost ticket item. Even if we look at a hybrid, like looking at doing something that is like a nature-based play, maybe with a mix of some commercial activity, equipment, play equipment, which is something that I've had conversations with a mix of different playground companies to see if we could do something like that, because I know those are things that came up in the conversations that we've had. So I think the hope is still there that it could. There's a lot of great grants that are available. I know we're looking into those right now. There's a lot of great grants available that we think, Fenimore Woods will be ripe for. It's just not shovel-ready yet, so we can't start running after those. That's the tough part about it. But if there's a way to even get grants that possibly offset the greater comprehensive part of the project, like, including the stable rehab, the accessibility, the pavilion, things like that, maybe there is a chance that we could have some I don't want to guarantee, but replacement done to the playground, because I know we dubbed it a high-level item on the list. I know it wasn't top of the list of a priority. I think everything was a priority that was on our list, but we would like to see it get replaced.
Well, one more, I promise.
No, that's
Sorry.
okay.
I
Just
didn't have
bring
any
them on.
depositions to take today, so I get to take it out now. In terms of the ADA issue, and I might be straying outside of the scope you're prepared to talk about. I gather, obviously, if we're up the top dealing with the restroom and the stable area, anything adjacent to that's going to have to be brought up to spec. Obviously, this board, and I think at least a certain segment of the public, has placed, putting aside the law, that this needs to be part of the project in any event. So I understand that's part of the connectivity between the lower part and the pavilion, and then from the pavilion up to the stable area. Is there a point in time where we have to do something with the playground? In other words, once we start fiddling with the property as a whole, does that trigger things down there or in other places?
There's no requirement if the playground isn't something that's feasible as part of the project. It's when we start touching the playground itself. So if we decided we wanted to sort of dig into a portion of it, that's where we would start to trigger those requirements. So we saw, let's establish a parking spot adjacent down there that obviously serves the greater purpose of the park as well, and then run a pathway. And of course, we would have to determine the feasibility of that pathway. So that's something our engineer would have to work on to make sure that that meets the requirement, and the percentages of slope that we would need to at least get to the playground. So if we could get somebody to the playground with an accessible pathway, we felt like that is a good stride to try and make.
Thank you very much. Sorry for all the
No,
questions.
it's okay.
I just have a quick comment. First, I'm happy there's some momentum that can get done, because I know it's been stalled for some time. I like the fact it can be parceled out and not just sold as one big project that we can never do. And I think, the basic things that can be done through the township is a wonderful thing, if that can be done. Like the fence comes to mind. Like, that's just a simple, low-hanging fruit. Make the park look better, because right now it's a really tired-looking park. It needs some work, and I think the basics could be done, and then we can add on as time and money allows, so.
Yeah, and when we made our presentation last March, to the board, and, where, we kind of stopped was that we started to look at things legally. Can we legally piecemeal parts of the project? Can we do a design build, which is a different type of building? We determined with John Rice, our solicitor, that it wasn't feasible for us to do something like that. And we looked at a lot of different methods for how, we could go about this to save money, essentially. And then, of course, came back around to say, okay, let's sit down and let's meet with other architectural firms and say, okay, here's what our prior engineering firm has done, and this is what they told us this was going to cost. Take a look at that, because we have all that detail. What can we do to save money? What would you do to save us money? And that's where we started to look at things like the sewer. The sewer system, being the location of the building, sewer is not right in Eagle Road. It has to be run all the way to Paul Road, which is a long haul. And it's also on a slope. There's some directional drilling that has to occur with that to be able to trench that. So that we knew was a high-ticket item as part of that. So we took a step back and we said, okay, well, what if we rehab a septic system that's there? We know there's a septic system underground. It's actually a cesspool system that's underground. We had it scoped. So we had Delaware Valley Septics come out. They scoped it, determined it failed, so it wasn't something that could be rehabbed. So what were our other options and what would meet the DEP requirements? So we took a lot of time going through those pieces and dealing with some of these contractors back and forth. It's, you put in a request, you wait a week, you get a proposal, the proposal's not the way you need it, then it's 2 more weeks to get it refined, and then you work through that process. So it just drags out. And then this is, times every other project that we're working through. But what we did determine is that, according to DEP, we would receive permits for a system where we would have a tank system, essentially, that would be a pump and haul. So we'd have like 3,000 gallon systems underground to where, we would have to bring in a hauler, to take care of that on a recurring basis. Like, it would have a system set up in it where it would be able to notify, so we know when it reaches its point where it needs to be, you know, to be pumped out. So we saw that as a cost savings. And right now, we're still not sure what the order of magnitude of cost savings is going to be to that, but we do know that that is something that would meet DEP permitting, and that we could do, even though, you know, running obviously sanitary, you know, running a sewer line is usually the most prudent. But it's definitely a way to kind of cut back the impact of the cost. So those are a lot of things we looked at. And then, you know, interviewing groups, obviously, to come in and look at the stable, and then landed on Seiler Jury, which is a pretty reputable firm in the area that has done a lot of historical work, like on historical buildings, older buildings. So that's where we are. And as of right now, I anticipate that June 17th meeting, and, you know, obviously we'll be communicating with, we have a large group of people and residents that have been wired into the project, keeping them updated on what's happening in terms of that date so that they can come out, obviously, and make their comments, continuing to give this board updates as much as we possibly can, and just trying to make as much headway as possible to try and get something done. I agree, just little things like fencing, cleaning up the parking lot, re-rolling it, redoing the parking bumpers, just things like that will make a really big impact to this park really fast. I mean, I even think the lower part of the park with the Shimoni Road culvert and the weir that has been replaced, not only has it restored amazing function by now channeling water into what had really been a stagnant pond. I know we've seen the algae bloom accumulate every summer. Now that project is not only given a facelift, but there's a functional improvement. So we're going to be monitoring to what degree does this help keep oxygen flowing into the pond to keep it clean, so that it doesn't have that buildup. It doesn't mean that that's not going to happen, but it is something that we're going to be looking at, because we realize ultimately in and around the pond there is still work to be done.
Excuse me. Yeah, I think it's really good to separate the items, which is good, and that, say, the part in red that the township can help do some of that stuff. The part in yellow, which also includes the parking lot, but I think that could be separated also, possibly. Couldn't it time-wise be separated as well? Like, things, say, if it's a playground, certainly the pavilion needs to be fixed. Like those does it all have to happen at once, or could it be?
Yeah, I don't think it does. I think we can piecemeal it out as long as we're not dragging the project out longer to where we are impacting the bond at that point. I mean, for instance, if we were ready to get started on fencing, perhaps, you know, at a sooner timeline because we're ready, as long as it doesn't impede other work, like we do need to have a strategic plan as we go about it, in terms of how it will be, you know, sequenced. I think that is certainly something that we're evaluating as well in terms of how that could be carried out. We saw the parking lot and the design work in and around the stable being part and parcel with the stable. And when we discussed it internally, at that point, I'm sure it's something the engineering department would reconsider and relook at. I'm just not sure if that's within our bandwidth to be able to manage that.
Yeah.
But we can take another look at it.
Yeah, and then when I went over there a month or two ago, like the outside portable bathrooms there, but it's down near the pavilion. Like it's not near the stable. It's actually at a spot that's going to be used more. Like if you're down at that playground, it's a hike to get up to the bathroom, especially for a little kid or whomever. So that the position it is now and closer to the pavilion, it's a better spot. I mean, it's a temporary one.
Right, well, that's always been one of the biggest criticisms of the park in terms of rentals. Even the heyday of rentals is that they have to walk all the way up to the stable to use the bathroom. So that was initially why we had, you know, changed the configuration of the park to make the bathroom more central, so that it could be quickly accessed if you're at the pavilion. It was actually part, you know, it was a pavilion bathroom structure. And then obviously it would be nearby to the playground at that point. But I don't envision that we would have a portable toilet on the site in addition to the
No,
stable.
but we could replace it with something. But I don't think it has to be at the stable. That's my opinion.
Tammy, I have one question, if that's all right. Since I am new to the whole project and everything else, but am I to assume that we have a bond and we got $1,650,000, I'll say in the bank, but available for use on this project? Is that correct?
Right, so right here, this may be just slightly dated, and that's only because we have paid Seiler Jury some money at this point, not a whole lot, but, so this is what the budget looks like, again, in a ballpark
Right.
currently.
Now, when is the bond up, or how long is the bond available?
It's ticking, it's on a soon timeline.
Okay.
It's very soon. I can't give you a direct time when the bond council is gonna come looking for it, but I think the sooner we can continue to show progress and making payments and working towards that, the better.
So there is a bond council. Is this a Radnor bond council?
I think it would be facilitated through the lending agency.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And
But-
I'll leave that to our finance department, but
Yeah.
I know that we did just meet on the project not too long ago, and, they did reiterate the urgency.
Not knowing anything about any of the proposed improvements and all that, is there any parameters that you could estimate, I guess, that what would $1,670,000 cover? In other words, I know I'm pinning you down, that's not fair. But if I were to give you $1,670,000, could you do this project? I'm sorry, with the township, the township doing what we have in red there. In other words, how realistic and how much grief will you get at June 17th about the budget? Well, this one's going to cost, and this, we know the normal pecuniary aspects of this, but I mean, is $1,670,000 realistic?
Well, so if I back up to the March meeting from last year, we had presented various scenarios, and they ranged from what can we get done with what's remaining that we anticipate, to here's if we wanted everything.
Right.
So going through that meeting scenario, I think we're going to come into this year and say, here's what we can get done with what we have remaining. So that's what we're going to be working towards understanding. And
Okay.
that's where things like the playground just may not fit within that. And unless there's the opportunity to get a sizable grant, or a sizable grant for the park, in totality, in the project in totality, which is certainly possible. Now, the only thing that I don't know may or may not jeopardize that is how we facilitate the project. Sometimes granting agencies, they want to see a firm that's overseeing, the project, versus some of the parts and pieces we're doing in-house. But those are things we'll look at, in the
Gotcha.
grant detail. But I think we're going to work backwards, as we did then even, to see what we can afford within that. So if it's the stable plus the pavilion, plus fencing, plus, that's what we're trying to achieve. The playground, again, sans any, not having any grants in hand, I think
Right.
is going to be a tough one as part of that. But,
Right.
our hope is that, we can get it all done, everything that, we kind of showed on there, and get that done and spruce up the park and make some noticeable improvements within that. The tough part is when it gets bid,
Yeah.
and that's where, it's in
Lot
the
of
details. So I think when the stable gets bid, that's going to be the big sort of
Gotcha.
keystone part of the project that we have to understand. And we're trying to anticipate that. And, like we talked about at our last meeting, that's a sizable portion of what's remaining.
Thank you.
Okay, Artericio Park? Oh, I'm sorry, public participation. We ask that you give your name, address, and
My name's TJ Doyle. I live on Fenimore Lane. I'm not sure if there's the ability to pull the presentation back up, but love to reference it if possible. I haven't been actively involved in this discussion. I've attended some of the meetings. I know that other neighbors have been more active and vocal about what their wishes have been. I've lived at 7 Fenimore for 15 years now. I would say that I rarely use the park. In my opinion, it's a dump. It's been tired, not just recently, it's been tired for years. When I've been disgusted with the progress of this in terms of timing, not by anybody on this committee or Tammy's efforts, just the general obstructionists of people who are anti-change, who hold every single tree to be sacred, whether or not township arborists have labeled them as hazard trees, which pose risk to life and safety. I would just like to see anything done, really. That's why I'm here tonight. Unfortunately, some of my neighbors weren't able to come, but there's something like, if I count up the houses on the street, can't really see where my house is. I live directly across the street from here. There's like 18 children. So I've been at the park. I've seen people doing drugs in the park. I think people are familiar with the fact that somebody committed suicide in the parking lot within the past 18 months. Somebody decided to show up and shoot a gun for target practice. I think it's an attractive nuisance in the condition that it's in. I think, Bill, you asked questions about it. Last time I saw figures, the bond was something like $3 million. We've wasted half of it in study after study, interest payments. I'm a taxpayer. You all are presumably living in the township. If any one of us borrowed money to do a project at our house and sat around for 8 years on that money, paying interest on it and not spending a dime towards physical construction, not architectural planning and meeting after meeting after meeting, it's at the point to just do something with it. Or give the money back. Just pay back the bond. Don't spend any money. But at least I would feel better about it as a taxpayer that this money has been literally wasted, over almost half of it at this point. So, asking what we can do with what's left over, very minimal, I'm sure. There was one point that the plan that was put out initially was like very thoughtful, move the playground away from the road, away from the traffic, away from danger, get rid of the pavilion, which is at this point able to, I could probably push it over. I get that the stable might be near and dear to certain people's hearts, but from my kitchen window where I live and where I look out, I can see a blue tarp I've stared at for years now. Every time I do the dishes, I stare at a blue tarp. It's like, where do we live? We're not like hurricane damage here. It's time to do something. Either just make the decision. I truly don't care if the stables stay or go, and I know that may be an unpopular decision with respect to certain other people who live in there, but I'm the one who's looking at it. Nobody else. I've talked to my neighbors who actually are in view shed of it, and unfortunately, again, they couldn't be here tonight, and I'll work to have them here next month or whenever the next meeting is. But we're all sick of looking at it. And so, I appreciate the fact that this was sort of a 3-part project. You have the weir happening, you have some stormwater controls that have to happen, but all that is sort of like have to have. And, we're hung up here on, just trying to save something that may not be savable. And sure, we can all throw money at it, but there's not a whole lot of money left to do anything here. And as far as trees are concerned, if we would have planted trees 8 years ago, guess how big they would be now? I've planted plenty of trees on my property. I've had to cut down plenty of trees on my property. Trees grow back. Every tree is not sacred. I'm sorry, and I get it that there's designations for heritage trees and all that kind of stuff, and it may be unpopular, and there's the mature canopy and everything else, but 8 years is a long time. Trees grow back very quickly. They just do. They're a renewable resource. People have to get that, an impression and understand that that's what is reality. Just wasting money by raising money, like, again, I go back to anybody here personally would not have gone to a bank, taken out money, put it in their account, paid interest on it every month for 8 years, and then have zero progress with respect to the physical condition of the park. So I appreciate the fact that we're trying to be now frugal, right, by employing township resources to do whatever they can, but that's as a result of not spending the money in the right ways or spending it at all. So, you know, for me, if I'm putting my wish list, you know, here, again, I have 3 children, the oldest of which is now 20. She was 5 when we moved here, okay? She was, you know, 12 when this money was raised, and I can count on my hand, one hand, other than going over here and ice skating. The last time I was up here standing talking about was when they tried to get rid of ice skating on the pond, and my son came up and gave a nice, thoughtful speech about why we wanted to keep the ice skating on the pond. But other than ice skating at the pond, count on my hand how many times I brought my children, walked them, 200 yards over to that park, because it is a dump. It's a dump. That's what I think of when I look at it. So I appreciate the fact that we can make it more accessible from an ADA perspective. I think it should be inclusive. I think that the more people who can use it, the better. When I first moved here, you would see the Boy Scouts out there. You would see people having family reunions. I wouldn't stand underneath that pavilion in the condition that it's in. And, and I also don't walk my dog around that park because it's a muddy, or around the pond because it's a muddy mess. There's, with the Weir project, at least now they've gravelled just sort of that, back elbow of it. But I'm like, why do we stop there? Go all the way around, where you have trees, roots, again, these sacred trees, where the roots are exposed, and they're in danger of becoming sick or ill. It just is, it's at the point where it's just, again, I know it may not be the popular opinion amongst the people who actually show up here, but I don't know, I'm at my wit's end in terms of just spend the money somehow. In whatever's left, spend it to improve however far it can go, and as much as you can do, and get rid of the trees that are hazard trees and that are going to hurt somebody when they fall down, and just move forward. At some point, we just need progress. We don't need this stuff just hung up forever. It's actually embarrassing. It's sickening to me when I go back to thinking about the amount of interest that we've paid, the amount of inflation that has taken place over 8 years. We've been through a hyperinflationary period with respect to COVID and everything else. Whatever dollars you have left, might get you half as much as what it would have had the money been spent thoughtfully initially, and not just hung up in process and bureaucracy. And again, I'm not blaming, I understand that there was a massive resistance that happened with respect to certain neighbors, but as somebody who has to stare at the blue tarp, it's time to move on. It's time to get rid of the blue tarp. And if that means the stables aren't viable, I get it. I'm not going to be upset about it as somebody who stares at it every day. If they are, great. That's awesome. I hope that everybody's happy with it, but let's see something actually take place here. Appreciate it.
Appreciate your comments. Any other participation? Public participation? Nothing? Arterisio Park improvements planning?
Yes, just a quick update. It's in progress. Still in the process of tweaking a conceptual plan proposal with the respective firm, as well as the land boundary survey. So it's in progress. It's in the pipeline. Hoping to have some more substantial updates soon.
Thank you, Tammy. And Radnor Township capital budget?
Sure. So this is a segue really a little bit onto Odorriceo Park. I just wanted to give the reminder there that the Odorriceo planning with the concept plan development, as well as land boundary survey and everything that's going to go into those initial stages, it was recommended by this board that they be funded out of that Park Impact Fund, as well as per bond that had been, per grant that had been received from Delaware County. So that secures a lot of funding that's going to go into those initial planning stages for Odorosio Park. So I anticipate there's going to be progress made there soon. And then just kind of talking a little bit about the township capital budget. We, as staff, are starting to look at putting that together for 2025. I know eventually, we want to understand and have direction for this board. I shared with you all the capital list that's in the budget now, unfunded, and eventually hoping to take a close look at that and come up with, have a procedure for how we might want to tackle that, provided that there are funds available. So I do believe that we will look at that if we know that there's the opportunity where there might be the establishment of a capital budget. I think at this point, if we don't have a designated amount or approach to that, that time might not be beneficial, and just continue to focus on the projects at hand.
Okay, any comments? If not, concerns about the dogs at the Willows Park, Skunk Hollow trails?
Sorry, I wanted to give an update there. The Board of Commissioners had discussion about Ordinance 2024-01 at their April meeting. And this was at the April 22nd Board of Commissioners meeting, so you had the opportunity to go back and take a look at that. It was the discussion and direction on enforcement of dogs per Ordinance 2024-01, which, if you'll recall, is specific to Skunk Hollow Park in regulating dogs being on a leash on Saturdays and Sundays and on township holidays. So we discussed some of the strides that have been made. Our township manager gave a presentation, and our superintendent of police stepped through some procedures and some things that the police department's going to be doing to educate the public. So essentially, if you've been up over at the park recently, you'll see that we have installed, our Public Works Department, of course, installed the post and rail fencing to give some separation between the parking lot and where you would walk up through the grass to the mansion. So there is a fence there now. We're just waiting on the signs that'll go in place there. I know we have some temporary ones that have been affixed to that fence that basically state that there are no dogs permitted beyond that point, no dogs permitted in the Willows Park. So part of the ordinance is to continue to reiterate that dogs are not permitted in the Willows Park, recognizing that the boundaries are a little obscure to where you actually park in the Willows Park for when your dog is arriving at the dog park and then entering the Skunk Hollow trails. So one of the other things that we're working to establish is, and again, just waiting for the sign company to produce the signs so we can get them installed, noting that when folks go up the pathway, the little wood chip pathway that goes up to the trail, that dogs must be on a leash before you enter the trail. So that will be a sign that's going to be prominent there in that location. And then at the points of entry into the Skunk Hollow trails, so referring to the main area off the Willows parking lot where you enter the trails, where you may enter at Sawmill, where you come in off of Paper Mill, if someone was to come in that area, as well as the parking lot off of Darby Paley Road, having another sign that reinforces the ordinance and the ordinance parameters in dogs requiring to be on a leash on Saturdays and Sundays on township holidays. So those entrances we're planning to cover, with signage. In addition to that, we're going to be updating the kiosk with some etiquette and use reminders just in general for the park, as well as usage relative to the dogs. I know we're working to develop more social media information to start putting that out in full force. Folks have had a really long grace period, I think, to the point right now where they feel like, well, the township's not doing anything, so I can just let my dogs off leash. But we are, and we had that discussion with our commissioners, as I had mentioned. So we are going to ramp up police presence. And this is a meet and greet. This isn't designed to be intimidating and, forceful in any way. We have an extremely professional police department with great people and great personalities. They interact with the public all the time. You know, we saw the high school thing that we just attended. So this is going to be more helping us to hand out informational notices, giving people some warnings if they see dogs off leash during those time frames to help remind people that this grace period is still underway. I think our department staff is going to try to get out as well and start to interact with people on a more regular basis so we can start, again, disseminating and reminding people like, okay, like it's time to really start doing this now. It's real. And then also working to make sure, there's communication, and then ultimately they will receive a citation. So we talked a little bit at that meeting about what the citation would look like. Obviously, it's something that folks could plead guilty and pay a fine because it goes into Delaware County's hands once it leaves ours. So if a citation is issued, at that point, there's not an interaction back with Radnor Police. It now defers to the Delaware County magistrate. Somebody can, decide if they want to plead not guilty and, go to the hearing, and then obviously the judge would make a decision whether or not they assign a fine or not assign a fine. Or however they want to proceed based on the circumstance. And as we know, the circumstances of, they can vary. Could be a simple infraction to something a little bit more aggressive that's happened within there. We're continuing to encourage folks to call 911 and make us aware of situations. Our police department wants to continue to document and report. So another thing that came across, as part of this ordinance passing from this board as well as at the commissioner's level is we want to make sure that our reporting is as detailed and as robust as it can, especially if we have repeat offenders, so that we can work through that process and mitigate, make sure that this is a successful ordinance, and that obviously the police department and being our enforcement division, does have to get involved with things like this. But, on the onset here, again, we're just trying to have a presence not only in the parking lot, but on the trails as well, interacting with people and helping to educate those who might not be aware that this ordinance has actually been adopted.
Tammy, has there been any more incidents? I know last month you told us about there was either one incident or other. Has there been any since?
No.
Okay.
None that have been reported.
Wow, that's great. Comments? If not, the West Wayne Preserve and Friends of Radnor Trails Parks Flood Reduction Projects, South Devon.
Sure, I wanted to give an update. So West Wayne Preserve, as you probably have seen, all of the plantings are in, so a lot of the trees are in, the understory is in. We've also put up the deer fence, and everything is starting to, with all the rain, look very green. So I think there's been some positive changes there. And the project is coming to a close. On that site, we're estimating probably by June 1st, the entire project should be completed. Now, jumping over to Fort, Friends of Radnor Trails Park, recognizing that there has been considerable progress as well over there. So right now it's a little confusing. So the walkway's still open, so you can cut through the park. We see pedestrian traffic over there actually pretty often. But now the fencing obviously is down, the field is open, it's been graded, it's been seeded. I know the Public Works Department this week put some signs up to encourage people to stay off of that area, so we want to give that reminder. As tempting as it might be to have your dog run through that area, it's very wide and open now in the area that was disturbed, as well as what's being replanted. We want to just remind folks to stay off of that area. The parking lot's going to remain closed for at least the next several weeks, and hoping for full opening come June. And then just, I know we had some discussions early on about the replacement of the fencing that was around the dog area. There was some discussions on making it an enclosure or extending it in some ways. And it seems that based on the discussions that we're going to replace it in kind in the L shape that it was in, and really just restore it the way it had been. We can always decide later if we want to come back and add to it, but at least for the time being, based on conversations we've had with dog owners at the park, as well as those that we've engaged. At this time, it wouldn't be an enclosed dog area. Actually might, remove some of the visual openness of the park if we come in and we do that. And I know some of the dog owners had some concerns that if we did enclose it, it might actually attract unruly dogs. Whereas, they feel that a lot of their dogs are pretty self-regulated and regulated to stay within the space. So unless there's a problem or there's an issue, that's the way we're going to move forward with that. And if we hear feedback otherwise, we can obviously reevaluate it. And then just in general on that, just reminds me that, if folks do have concerns in other parks with regards to dogs, bring them forward. I know we've kind of come to the close of our Skunk Hollow Willows discussion for the time being, but I know during that time, since 2020, when we were having discussions, we talked about Hartford, we talked about Cowan, Clemacrone, lots of spaces. I know Ditmar, there's some folks that might want to open that up to dogs. I would just continue to invite folks to come to this meeting, and we can tackle those conversations as they come before us.
Quick note, the preserve looks great visually. Pedestrian access, ever in the future, or is that just a stormwater preserve?
At this point, there's no plan for pedestrian access.
It'll only be nature.
Nature.
Right.
And folks will be able to see it from the trail as they
That-
walk by it.
That is very tempting. It looks beautiful out there. It does, and I walk on the trail back and forth. And the landscape of that whole thing there, all you need is a few benches out there and people will just feel real comfortable.
Just a question, was that in part due to the limitations with pedestrian access and making it accessible?
I think it has to do more with the topography of the area.
'Cause
It is quite wet.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
And it would have to have some sort of infrastructure installed. I know in initial iterations of that project that there was the talk of some boardwalks and experiences and lookouts and things like that,
It's a
but
much more complicated process to do that, but it is somewhat frustrating. We just have an area that's fenced off, but I like its visual, but just the fence is just.
well, the fencing is to preserve all that's been invested.
Yes.
So that is to keep the deer out and the wildlife out. So eventually, that's going to be removed. I'm pretty sure that's going to come out at some point.
My general sense was just to propagate the plantings there so they don't get destroyed.
Right,
But
because there's
the
also a several-year maintenance plan.
5-year thought would be that would come down, that
I believe so. I'd have to talk to Steve Norsini and what ultimately was decided for that. I know we had built within the project, and the project budget was at least a 3-year maintenance plan.
And
So those could
there's also a
thrive.
high density of foxes in that area too. Is that still the case? I think they're on the other side.
There's nothing that I've been aware of recently, other than the cases that were reported, a month or two ago, but I can check in with our animal control and see if there's
Have to be
anything.
vigilant. They were on the other side. They were just a lot of presence there, more than they had been. So it's just for the users of the Radnor Trail, it was just becoming more concerned, but I haven't seen them lately, so.
I haven't heard any recent reports,
Yeah.
but we can check in on that.
If nothing else, Radnor Activity Center at Sulpizio Gymnasium.
This is a project that is continuing. We have Heckendorf and Childs Architects are moving along. They're doing a lot of internal review, external review. We've had them through the building on several occasions. They're continuing to do their work and prepare their reports. I've seen some of their just preliminary detail, but all in progress and all very preliminary at this point. In fact, we still have the scoping of the piping, interior and exterior, that still has to be completed. So that project is still a little while away from any type of public discussion.
Okay, the Radnor Township Comprehensive Plan update.
So this is more of an announcement, just to remind the board and remind the public that there is going to be a public meeting. It does require pre-registration if you go on the township website under the Radnor 2020 or 2035 Vision for Radnor. There is a workshop that'll be at Radnor Memorial Library on Wednesday, May 29th, and all of the public are more than welcome to attend. It'll take place from 6:30 to 8:30. So if you want to check out the website, you can even just go to radnor.com, and I know we have a link there so folks can go and pre-register.
Okay, trail projects.
So I think for this item, I had just a couple of brief updates. I gave a very detailed presentation on all the trail projects at the last meeting, so if you didn't get a chance to hear that, if you want to go back and take a listen, that would be great, and that'll help fill in a lot of the details. Some of these projects obviously are a little more active than others. So take, for instance, Skunk Hollow Trail was listed on here. We were discussing rerouting trails within Skunk Hollow due to heavy erosion that's taken place on the hillside that drops down to Paper Mill. I want to acknowledge the work of many volunteers, including Mary Coe and Bob Nicholas, who have made amazing progress in establishing basically 2 trail arms that drapes down around that area. In fact, we were out there last week and we started to mark out where fencing is going to go and ultimately how that area is going to be shut down. No closure yet, but we are getting ready for that. But I do want to thank them and, again, many volunteers that were out as part of that effort to work towards helping us close that area because the erosion is just so bad. So ultimately, when that area is closed on that hillside, the steps that you see there now will be removed, and there will be plantings placed on that area where the fencing and the barricades will be placed. We'll have signage that's there to educate people on what's going on, to encourage them to have some ownership and not, continue to walk around the areas so they can thrive and become reestablished. I talked a little bit about the Brook Farm Trail. Discussions are continuing there with the HOAs. I had positive discussions with Brook Farm HOA, and then going to be working on getting another meeting with Ravenscliff to talk about their portion of where the trails come onto their properties. So that's in progress. We'll talk about the TAP Trail in a minute, but one thing I wanted to also just jump to let you know that internally we had a meeting with the Radnor Conservancy members, the director, as well as a couple of the board members. They came in, we sat down, we had discussions on the status of the Darby Paoli Trail as well as the Radnor Trail extension, just so they had a little more of an in-depth view of, the progress that's being made, albeit slow, but still underway. So for instance, on the Darby Paoli Trail, we're continuing to have some design work that's occurring there, recognizing that that is an unfunded project, on the horizon, but the actual design work has been funded as part of some of the grants that have been out there, as well as the Radnor Trail. In fact, at the upcoming, I believe it's the May 20th Board of Commissioners meeting, the Thomas and Campbell proposal is for the remaining design for the culvert, as well as some of the changes to that plan with the hazardous materials mitigation is actually going to be on the board for their approval. So again, still an unfunded project, but the design work is part of grants and a bond that had been issued. So those are funded. So they'll be giving consideration to those, again, most likely at that meeting that night. So although the project's unfunded, the design work is, and that's still continuing to move ahead. So I was going to jump to the TAP Trail just really quick. I wanted to acknowledge that we have a meeting set up on Monday where a group are just going to go out and take a walk with the Haverford Township Parks and Recreation Director, as well as a member of their Trails Committee and Steering Committee to see and understand a little bit more about the goals in terms of meeting up with the TAP Trail on the Haverford side, opposite of Cornerstone Properties, to try and understand a little bit further where it is in their pipeline and their goals and objectives, to see if there's any way that that can be bridged, no pun intended. We know there's a bridge you got to go over in one of the creeks, but to see if there's any positive progress that can maybe be made on that project on the horizon.
Okay. moving right along here. Parks and Recreation Board members, Park Stewardship.
I was going to show a copy of what we put together at the end of last meeting. I think we cut the camera and we were working on this, but I wanted to kind of jump back to it. So I wanted to take a look at what was assigned and make sure that this is proper. Yeah, Bill, you left, so we kind of put you in on some places. We kind of filled in the blanks with ore.
You broke the cardinal rule of Park and Rec Board. We assign, once you leave, you get assigned everything, so.
So this was what we landed on. I wanted to take a quick look at it and see if there were any changes, and then also just understand if there's been any feedback with regards to any parks you might have been out to in the last month. As always, I try to encourage, if you see something, let us know right away so we can address it. But if there's some things that have been encountered, we'd love to hear about them.
Could I ask a rude question?
No.
I have no idea where Enke Park is. Where is Enke? Oh,
It's right over here where the baseball fields are.
Okay, I can
You
handle
can go
that.
check it out right now.
Okay, I got you. And Harford Park is,
It's Biddulph, up Biddulph Road,
the end of the
and
tap trail, no. No, where is it?
if you go up King of Prussia Road and you hang a right, like past Radnor Elementary, make a right onto Biddulph Road, and then
Biddulph.
take that down to Upper Gulf and make the right. It's up there on your right.
Beautiful, okay.
It's our dog park.
Okay, yes, okay.
Yes,
And,
home of Mainline School Night.
Okay, and Dittmer Park, where's that?
Maplewood Avenue and South Valley Forge Road. So right next to St. David's Church and Wayne
Oh.
Elementary School.
Absolutely, okay. Capelli Driving Range, I know, and
I can get
Radnor
you-
Skate Park is right here, right?
Right, it's right down here behind us. And I can help you out with that one.
No, that's fine. I just direct me in the right direction, that's all.
So if these are good, I can circulate.
They're good. Macron question. Looks like the tennis court surface is getting a little bit, showing its years, I guess, and some puddling and whatnot occurring in the long list of a million things that we have to do. Is that on the radar at all, or is there any kind of preordained plan on that when we did the park? I don't remember if there was a discussion when we did that.
So when we did the park and we rehabbed the park, we did some spot repair. We knew that it wasn't going to be sustainable on the long term, but we mostly resurfaced. It wasn't reconstructed in any way. And I think if you take a look at the basketball court, I believe there's some disruptions to the basketball court as well. So both are in the capital budget.
Can you publish this, or can you send it to me, or?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Lastly, public participation.
Michael Kearney, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
124 Walnut Avenue. I was going to withhold my comments about Fenimore, but then I decided I better say something given the previous comments. I am a member of the Fenimore Woods Coalition, the people who are resistant to change and don't want to chop down dead trees. To the contrary, right, no one from that group has suggested that we maintain unsafe conditions in Fenimore Woods. And I just want to remind the commissioners that, or the board members, excuse me, the reason those blue tarps are ruining their neighbor's view shed is because they're protecting a historic structure, all right? And that historic structure prior to Fenimore Woods Coalition being involved was left open to the elements and was rotting in place. So they've been on there a long time, much longer than anyone would have wanted, but nonetheless, they're there for a reason. And I just would, again, remind you all that, right, historic properties in Radnor are not optional as far as I'm concerned. I live in North Wayne. I've lived in North Wayne for 45 years. When I moved into North Wayne, the houses in our neighborhood were called Wayne Dogs because nobody wanted to live in them. And they were the least expensive houses in the entire township. Now, I can't afford to live in my neighborhood because it's a National Historic District. People like old houses, they like the ambiance, they like the walkability and all of the things that make North Wayne a great place to live. And I would just want to point out that the township is filled with historic structures. Many of them are actually within the parks that you are the stewards for, including the Willows and other places as well. There are historic structures there. They add to and make life in one of the things that make life in Radnor worth living. So I just think it's good enough to be cynical about this, but I think generally speaking, I'm pleased. Personally, I can't speak for the coalition because we haven't talked about this meeting yet, but I'm pleased to hear of a more incremental approach where you can do things in pieces and that the township is willing to try and save money and do some of the things themselves. I think that's all good news as far as I'm concerned, and I just hope I hope that the commissioners will continue to support the effort, and that we can get it moving, because no one wants the park to be in its current condition, nor the condition it was 8 years ago, right? Right. But improvements, right? An improvement that involved wiping it clean and starting with a clean slate was the thing that we were all really objecting to. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other public participation? If not, are we ready to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
What's it? All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well run.
Nice and quick. Yeah.
Yeah,
Give everything its proper time.
so
Yeah.
I guess what happened.